There is no other brand out there like Longines. It's a brand that continues to inspire creativity with so much of their work. Likewise with a brand like Omega, managing to continually deliver the most incredible pieces of historic design. I cannot implore you enough to look into this brand and study them further. From their up-to-date specifications, workhorse movements, bargain prices if you look hard enough. And to top it off, the reason why I'm here, some of the best and most incredible pieces of design from any major watch brand. It just so happens that every single year, Longines tops the charts as one of the most successful brands when it comes to sales. Watch sales in general, they're in that top 3 sector, right next to a brand like Rolex. So Longines is doing okay. No matter how I promote them, no matter how much I appreciate their designs and want to share them, the brand is very successful. But I'll admit, the reason why I'm covering this video and this topic is because so many of the modern watches that we find today, where they're considered affordable, this kind of category, too many watches, they lack character, they lack individualism. Many of these designs and styles today are catering to a mass audience appeal. They're catering to a specific sector of the watch market, those in a certain age bracket. They're not necessarily focusing on designs and styles that embody the period that inspired them. That's what makes Longines pieces so interesting, is that their styles, they transport you back to a time where they were conceived and built. And I would hope that a video like this would shine a spotlight on some of my favorites, and even more so, watches that you might not even have known existed, but are brilliant. Irregardless of price, Longines is just, it's exceptional. So I've chosen 10, more like 12. All around that heritage collection, those old school inspired design details. So in no particular order, let's start with the Legend Diver. Both the Skin Diver and Legend Diver, they embody 1950s design charm. At the dawn of the scuba diving age, every single brand was trying to get on top of this professional platform. But what makes the Legend Diver so great, especially at this price point, is that it's a compressor case. A technology that was quite forward-thinking at the time. The compressor case goes against a lot of what we see with the modern platform. There are only a handful of watches and brands that adopt this style and this format. The next one up from the Legend Diver is probably the Jaeger-LeCoultre Memovox. And there is definitely a good debate about water pressure and how these cases hold up over time next to an external bezel. The fact that you have to operate an external crown to function an internal bezel to do all of the work. One of the main downsides, of course, is that it's very difficult to operate underwater, especially when you have gloves on your hands, and it can also be difficult being precise, setting the bezel exactly where you want it to be. But the Legend Diver has seen many revisions, most recently a 39mm variant that I think still has a lot of people talking. New case profile, new crowns, new handset, and a diameter that is smaller, in fact, smaller than the original. The Heritage 1945. I think a lot of us underplay how pivotal this watch was for the further development of the Heritage collection and where it started and where it is now. This piece came about thanks to Ben Clymer, who lent in his original of this variant. They created a more modern, upscale size. But I think the reason why I chose this particular watch is it's the details that matter, that are still pertinent today. Even now, for its price, it's one of the most dynamic brush dials that we have ever seen. It's hard to describe it depending on the light. Salmon, copper, silver, the applied hobnails, the minimal text, the heat-blued hands. And what makes it even better, using a fully automatic ETA movement and it's still thin in profile. When looking for that well-tailored, well-styled, very time-appropriate watch for the 1940s, I think this Longines still gets it, still covers all the important aspects. The Heritage Military, for those of us who prefer more field watch-oriented pieces, something with a bit more utility behind their names. Both the Marine Nationale and the RAF are some of the best examples of how Longines pays attention to very specific details. Like for example, the Marine Nationale using blackened loom inside of its hands, in a way highlighting how moisture got into the case over time and how it affected radium loom. The simplicity and balance on this dial cannot be understated, from its pencil hands to the types of numerals chosen, the choice of a minimal typeface, ignoring the Swiss made at the base of the dial and emphasizing Fabrique Suisse on the top. And I think what they also get so right with this watch is understanding proportion. It might be quite a bit bigger than the previous generation, about 6mm, but everything is scaled correctly. And what we see shared across both of these pieces are the blued hands, but also that parchment colored dial. Moving along to the RAF variant, which is also quite a fascinating piece, especially when you dig into its history, how they've even gone the extra mile to add simulated corrosion and texture to the dial. Those individual specs that you will either love or hate, and I think this is one element that deterred a lot of people away. I think with a watch like this, they went a bit too hard in some places, but then they made up for it with these beautiful blued hands, managing to get the scale correct even for a 39mm diameter piece. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that these military-inspired watches in particular should have been brought down in size. They should have been about 36, 37 mils instead of the larger 38 to 39. But these details are just so incredible that I think far too many brands would ignore when we look to the individual crowns and how they correspond with the case size, and how these separate elements on the watch just speak in unison. So where the RAF is more of an early 1940s design, late 1939, the Marine Nationale is more of a transitional, a late 1940s, early 1950s. Now the Heritage Classic, we're looking to the 1930s. One of the best embodiments of a sector dial watch for an excellent price, who would have guessed? Just one of many examples of how Longines attacked the sector dial through the 30s and the 40s, and they are genuinely some of the most beautiful watches ever made. I like to look closer at the black dial, because you get so much of that contrast that you don't necessarily notice on first glance with the white or the silver dial. What makes or breaks a watch like this is scale and proportion, and as is always the case, Longines seems to hit it out of the park. From the crosshair running through the middle of the dial, to the sub-seconds which takes up the entirety of the base, to the Arabic numerals that rotate around the dial, and the choice of handset. It's minimal, it's simplistic, but it gets the point across so well. And now moving to the next few pieces, we get a bit more technical. A blast from the late 1960s, early 70s, the Ultra-Chron. 5 Hz movement, incredibly accurate, incredibly detailed, and a one-to-one recreation of their original diver. For a brand to not only label the watch and design it around a certain style, but to go to the extent to actually introduce the movement again, tells you a lot about how the brand not only cares about their heritage, but also being true to themselves. Because I'm sure 9 out of 10 companies would have just gone for the aesthetics, save the technology for another day. I think what speaks most to me about this piece, not necessarily its design, but it's the detail. And it's also considering the fact that it's very much a cornerstone watch to show you what Longines as a brand is all about. The aesthetic of this piece covers a lot of that Seiko turtle sort of design. These large cases, lots of facets, lots of applied elements on its dial especially. We see how that corresponds with the choice of hands, and then when you look closer to the dial, the applied Ultra-Chron emblem, the applied hourglass. Definitely not a watch for everyone, but it's highly commendable. And then on the other hand, a watch that was made to appeal to a larger audience, the Zulutime. The Spirit collection has had tons of success, and for them to now introduce a GMT complication, see this watch that now exhibits elements of late 1940s, early 1950s design, with the date at the 6 o'clock position at a 42mm size or a more manageable 39. When you see the competition that this brand is going up against, but more importantly the designs which so often lack individualistic style and character, this one takes the cake. That said, though, it does feel like the watch did go a bit too far in some places. True to the Spirit name with the 5 stars, it's a little bit excessive seeing it on the dial. This piece has been spoken about so much over the last few years that I feel like I'm just treading old ground. But I think what the brand set out to do, they have achieved, in a sense that it's now one of the best GMT watches, true GMT watches. Everyone hates that word, but it's one of the best GMT watches that money can buy you today. And I would say from here on, these are the watches that are not spoken about the most, but they are definitely my favorites that Longines has on offer. The Silver Arrow from the 1950s. When this watch was announced, it came and went. There was barely any coverage around it, but it's such a beautiful design. Right around the early to mid-1950s, we see this watch embody all of those traits. From those gorgeous leaf-style alpha hands, to the polished metal surround around the minute track, to the applied hour markers that looked like corrugated sheet metal, the minimal text, the touch of cursive for the Silver Arrow script, and an almost disco volante style case. Does it get any better for a piece like this? Minimalist, simplistic, captures the time period when it was made. I've been eyeing this watch a lot over the last few months, and next to this one there is one more piece, the final watch that I'll be covering in this video. The Avigation BigEye. I love this watch. It's the one piece that made me fall in love with Longines, and still to this day it's one of the best value for money chronographs that you can buy. I'm wearing its successor, but make no mistake, its design is imprinted in my brain. Everything from its questionable development as a prototype to its 1930s, 40s, we don't actually know the time period when it was made. There's a belief that it was based around the 1970s. Nevertheless, the big pushes, the detail on the dial, the typeface chosen, how the sub-registers work together, those pencil hands, they're just gorgeous. How it goes so well with straps and just makes for a great daily wearing watch. One One of the big drawbacks with Longines chronographs is they focus on making them automatic, which adds to their modular movement, which makes them thicker on the wrist. Now, 2 of these 3 chronographs that we're covering in this video have the same problem when it comes to thickness, but that shouldn't detract from the piece that you're getting. Of course, they now have this in titanium, and it would be so great to see the BigEye evolve further. It's a watch that deserves more love. Now, the Heritage Chronograph 1946, never spoken about, barely ever covered. It's one of the most beautiful chronographs that I think you can get for the money. A watch based on that post-war aesthetic, extremely minimal. It's a marriage of dress and utility as a watch, but the beauty comes from it being so minimal. The Breguet numerals, the leaf hands, all of which are heat blued, surrounded by a minute track with markers at every 5-minute interval. If this watch was brought down a few millimeters in diameter and had a hand-wound movement, it would be one of the most popular chronographs I think the brand would have ever created. It is so charming, and it's also emblematic of the kind of archives that Longines has in their museum. But the watches that I've saved, the best for last, the Heritage Tuxedo collection. These watches, just like the Silver Arrow, they arrived, they disappeared. There was barely any coverage, but I think these 2 watches embody what makes Longines such an incredible brand and why they are worth pursuing. And if you've made it this far in the video, the watch on the cover photo, the Heritage Tuxedo Chronograph. This watch is actually amazing and manages to evolve where the Heritage Chronograph 1946 was and where it deserves to be now. 40mm diameter, it's 13.5mm thick. The fact that the case flank allows for the kidney style pushes, the crown, everything to be set in the same line. Even though it's using a modular movement, this external attention to detail is where it matters. And then when we take some time to look at the dial, heat blued elements on the hands, railroad track on the inside and outboard. Bicompax chronograph where each sub-register has separate metal surrounds. That relationship between white, cream, blue, black, silver, it's a masterpiece. And once again, it's a watch we just don't hear spoken of. Of all the pieces in this video, this one in particular is the watch that says to me why we should be pursuing Longines watches. It does everything it says on the tin and more. If we saw Patek Philippe on this dial, could we even imagine how much it would be worth? In a world today where so much of modern design is very formulaic and repetitive. But what these do so well is they capture character, time periods, and styles that embody what Longines has always been about. All that said, these are just opinions around a very specific section of Longines' collection. And that's what's great, because there's far more to discover from this brand. I think for most of us, it's that perfect intersection of what you're getting, the price you're paying, and everything under the hood that's maybe not spoken about, but as enthusiasts we know, they're insanely good. And in my case, the designs, they are not conventional. And that is so powerful today. They're inspiring. It allows someone like me to return back to them and to appreciate them every single time. And so I look forward to hearing your thoughts about Longines and why we appreciate them. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video. See you in the next one.